Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Foresight TV. I am here with my friend John Reinhart, who is, I don't know even how to describe John because he's got his fingers in so many pots, mostly really, I guess all technology related when you come right down to it. And so we are going to get into a great conversation right after this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Hey John.
Hey Steve, thanks for having me. This is great.
This is really cool. So let's just start, for people who don't know who you are, let's talk about who you are and what you do and what you're passionate about.
So great. So I was interesting watching the headlines of this thing because I do have a bifurcated entrepreneurship life. I enjoy, if you exclude the personal side of my life, which we're happy to talk about too, but the professional side of my life, I kind of wear three hats, which is pretty cool. The first one is a recent hat. The last 2 years, I had the pleasure to be invited to be the entrepreneur in residence with the National Institute on Aging. So I advise the portfolio of SBIR awarded companies, and we have some great companies, and the team up there is fantastic. Been a serial entrepreneur for 30 years. The two active deals I'm in are both in aging. One is in clinical training. So we train CNAs online as a clinical workforce frontline caregiver opportunity to have people get licensed that aren't licensed currently. And then that's in partnership with American Healthcare. And then the final thing I do is a couple of our partners have a real propensity to look at betterment of life with natural products. And we have a hemp company that has a lot of topicals and some ingestible products that we really enjoy providing nature back to betterment and wellness.
So I was sort of, my thought was when you said that, I said, well, man, you should have mailed me some of that and we should have sort of eaten up and we'd be having a very different show, but yours is actually not that kind, right?
Well, it's funny. CBD is the part that's the part of the cannabis plant that's distilled in gummies and oils. That is not a psychotropic additive, so it has THC at a low level, so it's not medical marijuana. The topicals don't even have CBD. They have elements of hemp and the properties of hemp, which are very good for the skin and other areas of betterment for your life and for your body. So, no, we don't make you high with our products.
Well, there's almost a part, I guess I shouldn't say I'm disappointed by that because I think that's really where the benefits are. And I think there are long-term reasons for not getting high like that. But anyway, okay, so let's start with talking about your role at NIH and what you're doing. And what really inspired me to have you on today is that there is there is, I don't know, I guess it's the right term. There's free money available for some of you entrepreneurs out there that have some great technology idea and just looking for a way to get funded and get started. And I want to just address that comment that was asked in the group there. Angie, it will be available on LinkedIn and YouTube and at the Senior Living Foresight Facebook channel. So lots of places to find, and at the Foresight, the Foresight website, you can find it under Foresight TV. So lots of places to watch afterward. Thank you, Jada. Jada's running things in the background, and she makes this all happen. But let's talk a little bit about this grant program and the kinds of things that are possible.
So the things that you always wish you knew but didn't know, right? So no money is free. Everything has effort, but there is a difference between dilutive funding. They take part in ownership of your company, and non-dilutive funding, which are grants and obviously customer revenue as a source of funding. But I was honored and very intrigued by what the NIH, National Institute on Health, what does it do and how does it fund innovation and how does it care and go directly into aging innovation? So when I was invited to learn more about the NIA, my colleagues up there are great. They have a whole program where they manage SBIR grant program, and that is a grant, meaning that it's non-dilutive. The division I work in is extramural, means that it's ventures that are for profit. Me, you, we could all create a venture. We have to be U.S. based and owned by U.S. Citizens. But when we do that and we file an application, 3 times a year, we have an open call at NIA for applications. And so we have a call in January just closed, April and September. And during those calls, the totality of grants awarded each year, which again, this really surprised me and was great to hear, is $140 million a year of distributed funds. So that's larger than any of the funds I know that are in this aging space. And the three elements that are pretty interesting is it's primarily, NIA has been primarily over the past and even currently, about 70% of the funds go to something related to Alzheimer's or dementia. And so like AD, Alzheimer, dementia, related dementias. But the other 30% is really the growing category, aging in place, censoring, monitoring. We also have a lot of things that come into improving diseases that affect older people. And so $140 million a year, 3 times a year, the grant applications. You go through a technical review pattern and panels and the scoring. And if you're selected and awarded, that is funding to perpetuate your innovation. And even it includes technology, aging in place, censoring. In the past, I think I'd always thought, which we do, is traditional therapeutics, medical devices, clinical research tools. This is kind of the new emerging part of the applications and the awards.
So, do I have to have matching funds, or what are the requirements? As you and I were talking offline, sort of, I think you told me that the typical grant for sort of early stage would be about $250,000.
So it gets in phases. So the first phase, you do an aims page of the project, and you do deliverables of what you think you're going to use. And I like to say it this way: the first phase one, you're right, Steve, is 300 up to 300,000. And then you do that phase of your project, and you come back with your results, and then you can apply for a commercialization phase 2 project that can be up to $2 million. But what I found interesting, and what I tell people is, I think when we think about the NIH and their apportionment to NIA, we think about America's Seed Fund because it's federal money, it's all of our money, so we're kind of America's Seed Fund. But what we're looking at and what we're interested in is evidence-based startups. And so there is a scientific element of a contribution to science, but then that's coupled with commercial value and real market value. And so when we put those two together, what we have is what everybody looks for anyway as an investor. Give me some evidence, give me some data, give me some proof. And this just wraps it up in the project that comes with the funding.
As you're talking here, I'm actually really, I hadn't thought about it until our conversation. But when I was in Arizona a couple of weeks ago, I met somebody who started this really intriguing app to me that's intriguing to me, that looks like it has great potential to really make a difference in the caregiving space for people to create better quality of life. And they've piloted it in a few places. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, man, this would be just, I actually have got a call with them in the next couple of weeks. And I'm thinking this would be could be a really, really good way for them to really accelerate their growth. So if I had nothing but an idea and I had no money, could I qualify, or do I have to have matching funds, or what's that?
No, there's no matching funds, though some states, even my home state of Kentucky, does match SBIR grants. So there is some state matching to federal dollars, but in the federal program, no, it's a straightforward application. Now, what I would say is, if it's an idea that's not well thought, or a project or a research or a study, think about it like this. In drugs, we have phase 1 clinical trial, phase 2 clinical trial, phase 3 clinical trial, then market approval, right? But if you go to the non-FDA side of the house, you don't have phase 1, phase 2, you don't have clinical trials. So think of this as technology trials, evidence-based trials. You apply for your first trial, you give an indication of what you're trying, why you think it'll work. And one of the things that really helps is you have a contribution to science, so some scientific value of the research. You have a commercial idea, so it has some value to the populace of aging and fits the parameters of NIA. But then you also have this concept that it's going to it's going to be done with collaboration of a scientist or some kind of science-based approach. And that's the difference, right? We all pilot, we try to pilot, we do things, but the big clarification here I want to make sure is you don't need to have a scientist. I could be a PI on this project, principal investigator. You could be a PI on your project, but it does help if you have science-based collaborations. And you definitely do not, for an SBIR, you do not have to be part of a research university. The research university grants are STTRs. It's a different category. So you don't have to be a researcher at a university to do this. This is a for-profit startup venture that has research-based concept and a great application that meets the parameters.
Let's pop the question back up there, Jada. So what about this? Could I do a grant opportunity with something like staff training and retention programs?
Yeah, so I think the end of the day, programs that are just, well, technologists for technology's sakes and service-based models just for services sakes don't really have as much commercialization viability as just things that are service-based technologies that can be expanded. So I think it has to have, in some regard, a technology overlay or a package or a bundle. It can't just be a service-based methodology, but even in the service-based methodologies, there's going to be technology components and tools, and there could even be copyright, materials or manuals. It's the evidence base that's more important than whether it's technology or services. It's what evidence you're creating and what does that do for a betterment, and then how does it have a commercial value?
Okay, cool. Well, that is really cool. So if I'm looking at this, I guess the thing we haven't really talked about is, so I'm looking at that and saying, I got an idea. Where do I start?
So it's interesting. We just had a cohort we did for minority-based and minority-based entrepreneurship, right? And so what we did was we take people that have an idea, but they're not ready to really pitch for the grant yet. And so we took them through this kind of development. Think about this development programmatic way that we can teach them all the aspects of business models and business fundamentals. We also have an AAP program, applicant assistance program. So if you've never done a grant, there's another I'm just telling you, I'm shocked. From a serial entrepreneur perspective, the NIA's programmatic support and programs towards any entrepreneur, from our program team to the AAP program to this cohort for minority innovators and entrepreneurs, there's a pathway for everybody, and there's a doorway for everybody. And the team up there seeks to find and help people get to the application process in a positive way. So I wouldn't let that stop you. I would send me a note and I'll hook you up with the program folks up at NIA, and they can walk you through what's the next step. The other thing I want to tell you too, Steve, I work for the National Institute on Aging. There's 27 divisions of National Institute on Health. So if it's diabetes, it might be somewhere else. If it's a heart, lung, blood thing, it might be somewhere else. If it's a nutraceutical, it might be somewhere else. So we can start with NIA if it's older persons or betterment of the senior population, or I like to call the longevity economy. But that's not the only door. There's a lot of doors here. The key is to make sure that you want to do an evidence-based approach, and you want to really get into something that you can show scientific value that it works, and that's great.
So Angie, you may have already found the best next thing to launch here, John, in this conversation. Angie, we're going to make available John's email address here. And in fact, Jada, maybe you can go ahead and pop that up now, because I know she may not be here for the whole thing. So that's how to find John. And you may get your box flooded with really great ideas, which is fun. I do want to say that one of the things that I think that you talked about is so important is really having a great idea. I sat as a judge for a bake-off that Amazon Alexa did for some new skills that were aging technology based. And I wasn't able to attend all the presentations from the entrepreneur, but there was this one guy who came in and he basically said, "I get this idea." And I don't know, I think the application had, stuff on it, but he had no answers to anything, no ideas. It was about as vaporware as you could get. That didn't make it past the first cut. And so you got to have something that's really you got to think about how it's going to change the world in some fashion, the lives of people, right?
Well, let me give you the secret of, so I had the pleasure of advising the portfolio that get awards, right? That doesn't mean they're all baked, and that doesn't mean they have the best final business model. But let me tell you what I tell them, and everybody that is around me knows the theory of the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps is really what you have to answer. The first P is the purchaser, and the purchaser is who pays for your product, who influences the person to pay for the product, and who uses the product. That first P of purchaser is not easy to do, and everybody should do it before you present your idea. If the Medicare Advantage is paying for it, but the doctor needs to say, yeah, it's a good idea, but the adult daughter or son needs to say, mom, why don't you try it? And mom tries it. That's one purchaser in a cycle. And then the other 4 Ps are the standard frameworks I love. It's the product, description of the product, the solution, product and services guide together. It's the price. It's the promotion. What's the tagline? If I walk by your booth, how do I know what you're selling me? And then it's the place. Where did I find you? Where did I meet you? How do I meet you? Is it social media? Is it marketing? Is it radio? Is it TV? Is it conferences? Is it webmail? Whatever. So it's the product, the price, the promotion, and the place. That's the marketing piece, and then it's the purchaser. And once you get that down, write it in a paragraph. Go through and reiterate. And that's where I start with all the companies I work with, and that's where everybody should start, because that will tell you if you have something viable, scalable, and replicable, which is where I judge.
Great. So, can you give me any examples of things that have gotten funding? I mean, I know a lot of this is sort of still proprietary kinds of things, but so maybe even in talking about areas or, do you have any specific examples?
Well, I think some of them are guys you and I have followed for years. Life Bio has 3 grants, doing some fantastic work in the AI space and working with managed care and working with all kinds of information gathering and storytelling. Care Coach, another one. Vivo, a recent one in health and wellness. A company called Care Virtue that I work with that's in the dementia Alzheimer's space. These are all really big companies. A company called MemoryWell. The nice thing about it, the grants are public. You can go out and find who's got a grant, right? The key is going to be how they use that grant to make a commercial business, and that's where our team really helps. So some of the biggest of the big, Endeavor. Some of the largest of the large kind of started here. Posit Science, some of the largest of the large kind of started in the science-based arena. Now they've commercialized, and some of the up-and-comers, we do showcases. We send people to conferences to introduce them to the market. They go with me in an NIA booth with some of our NIA staff team. We'll be at Vive. We go quite a few places, but the key is give them the market opportunities to be discovered and to figure it out. And again, the grants are public, and happy to, you can find who got them.
Cool. That's terrific. So, how do I ask this question? This one I thought about and I've sort of tossed out before, but when you sort of look out there in the world of the aging space, maybe specifically the senior living space, and is there something where you go, somebody ought to invent something to solve something that hasn't been invented? Any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess you have to clarify what level of senior living, right? Because senior living has a broad spectrum. Independent living, senior living, assisted living, and then on down to, seniors living in care communities. I think for me, the idea is you have to keep it focused on who the user is and what the user's experience are. All right. And so when I think about things, I think about the intersection of technology and human touch. And so I think about, as caregiver ratios continue to decline and family caregivers continue to be added to, brought into the mix, how are we going to coordinate that, right? And you could say care coordination, but care coordination as a general rule has been about chronic disease management or caretaking, right? I think you'll hear me say often, I think it's about wellness and well-being, right? And I think when you think about well-being, you think about a whole dimension of how do I live my best life, given my circumstances clinically, in the place where I want to best be cared for. And so I think what we're going to see is the continued emergence of how the Internet of Things makes physical spaces smart. And when the physical space gets smart, it in the background takes data and keeps track of what's going on. But in the foreground, it adds life elements that are very positive to good experiences. And I think we've always flipped them. I think we've always looked at healthcare entrepreneurs as health caring first and lifestyle second. And I think our senior living folks have led the way in saying we want lifestyle first and care is a smaller component. But at the end of the day, it's not about longevity and living years. It's about good life years.
So this is a really interesting question to me. I've spent more time in the last 6 months in communities talking to residents than probably ever have before. And my single biggest surprise has been that as I talk to residents who moved into, and these are mostly independent living residents, maybe all independent living residents. And I've had some interactions with some assisted living folks too, is that their number one driver for moving in, I so thought it would be and should be life enrichment, a well-lived life. But what I heard from them was that their number one reason for moving into senior living was to have increased physical safety, and it's something we don't market and we don't sell. And that doesn't mean as long as you provide safety, none of that other stuff matters. I think that the quality of life stuff is the differentiator. But I've been really surprised, and it's really caused me to sort of rethink as I talk to operators and I write about how we should be telling our story. How do we do this? You're probably aware of this horrible series, really a serial murder event that happened down in the Dallas area, where I think there are 22. This guy was going into senior living communities and stealing stuff and killing the residents and taking their stuff. And we're going to be I've got a really interesting call with some activists from that area. We'll be writing about this more in the coming week. But that safety thing, I think maybe is not as looked at as it should. Thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. So here's the thought I have. The first thing is there's always safety in numbers, right? So when you live by yourself and you may have your family gone or your older kids or your kids are grown, by yourself is no safe. By yourself has safety risk in there. And so in community you have safety in numbers. When you have safety in numbers, the key is going to be safety from what? Physical safety you brought up, which is a great one, and most senior livings have hopefully human design elements to have safety. So falls, jeopardies, or like you said, an intruder, that should be inherent in the mix. I think there's a different. It goes back to my view of Maslow's hierarchy of need. If you don't have safety and you don't have food and you don't have housing, you never self-actualize, right? But assuming that is available and is done where you live in community, safety in numbers, and assume that you have service care providers and access through transportation, your own or otherwise, people do desire for self-actualization. So I don't think we can separate the two. I do think your point is, maybe the advertisement should be a safe place where you can self-actualize, because I don't think safety should be forgotten. But I don't think that I would sitting around going, oh, I'd only buy a place because it was safe. Because I think community, socialization, engagement, all the mental part and the spiritual parts of growing old well cannot be forgotten.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I think that's really hard for those of us who are, whether we're doing technology or doing senior living directly, is that it's really hard to put ourselves in the shoes of an 8 or 9-year-old and understand what our needs are going to be. Right now, today, I look at senior living and I think, I'm 68, so I'm old enough to qualify. The biggest thing that I look at it and I go, is that I want to be around younger people and not just people who who are old. But but I'm not sure that when I'm 80 or 90, that may not be so true anymore. I may mostly want to be around people who are, a narrower group of people who are like me. And so I think that's part of what makes it challenging. So we've only got a couple minutes left. I want to actually shift gears here for a second, John. You've spent quite a bit of time thinking about the staffing challenges we have in the aging space and in senior living. And I just love to have you sort of just talk about what your thinking is, what you're doing about it, and those kinds of things.
So, I think you've done a great point, and a lot of your writing has been about this perspective of the career-minded healthcare worker. I think you referred to them as care heroes. I think for us, we spent most of our time looking at regulations and obstacles towards access, right? And so at CNA Online with ACA, we're introducing ourselves to the intersection of technology and career development and career opportunities. It's one thing to say we have a lot of people that, wouldn't do this job, might not do this job, and they do need all the pieces you say: pay, respect, sense of community, training, all that is totally true. But when we had the pandemic and we were asked to build a free course, so anybody that wanted to free could come and learn to be a caregiver, we trained 305,000 people, Steve, 305,000 people in less than 24 months, free. So that tells me that one of the obstacles here is the treatment and the job itself and all the elements around the communities and how the job workers are respected. I agree with that. The other one tells me that it's too difficult for people to leave a career in something else, become licensed. It's too difficult to become licensed and then not see a career path. You don't want to go back to college and be a nurse, but you don't want to be no licensed professional. You want to have a track. So that's where we spend our time. We spend our time with state regulators on why can't we do hybrid online learning where skills are in person, the theory's done online, they can do it anytime, day or night, and then every week the instructor meets with them and interacts with them on a regular basis to make sure they do the work and they can pass the test. But it's not passing the test that matters. What matters is we focus on competency transference in a way they can. If it's English as a second language, we should have Spanish training. If it's dyslexia, we should have audiobooks. We have that. If it's audiobooks and somebody doesn't want to read a PDF or a textbook and listen to audiobooks, we should have voiceover PowerPoints. We have that. We should have gamification. So these tools, the technology, you look at a textbook and you look at that experience, they're totally different. But if you look at that doorway being opened wider and wider, 305,000 people says there's interest. There's interest in healthcare. Some of them may have just said, hey, I don't have anything else to do. I don't believe that. I believe that we're all inherently caretaker by nature in a sensitive way if we have passion and a calling to to better the lives of people we're around. So I think inherently there is, but it has to have a track, a career, a profession, and then some of the things that you write about. But we have to do the hard work of getting the regulations and the things that are movable and changeable consistently changed. For instance, we've only made 26 states out of 50 where we can do hybrid online CNA training. Why isn't it all 50? And then this one's different than that one. And we go one by one and take these walls down. And that's where our work is. And I'm very proud of our team, and we've done some great stuff.
So one of the things that occurs to me, and I think that you can't quite see it, my Care shirt I've got. Care is one of our partners at Foresight. But one of the things that they've done a nice job of, we think about the usual things of they become the sort of Uberized staffing agents to reduce costs, and that's really wonderful stuff. But the other thing I think that they've really done is they've really celebrated their care heroes, and they've made caregiving fun. But as you were talking, 300,000 people is really a remarkable number.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the biggest problem we have with frontline caregivers is our own heads, that we're getting in our own way. Because if you're making $100,000, $200,000, 300, you're a CEO of a company, you're thinking, why would anybody ever want to be a caregiver? That's just a last resort. And perhaps if we actually saw that as a cool job, which I think Care does a nice job of, maybe we'd actually do a lot better in recruiting.
I think the pool's not big enough. So I think companies like Care can work with providers and find somebody that doesn't want a particular hours or jobs and be a mobile, like you said, Uberizing. The key is the pool's not big enough. And so if the pool's not big enough, the question is how to make the pool bigger. But the second thing is caregiving has this great work, like all of us in age tech and aging longevity economy. I don't look at it as a job. I look at it somewhat as a legacy mindedness. And when I do look at it that way, I look at caregiving the same way. I'm a caregiver to my kids, my wife, my
Yeah.
friends already. The key is how do we tap into the people that innately appreciate the higher power of caring and purposefulness with the work environments and conditions that make them feel respected, satisfied. And but I've never seen a care force or care workers like we have, never seen anybody that stood by the residents during COVID like those teams did. It was even closer than family in a lot of cases. They were there when the family wasn't able to come. And we train all over the country with some of the best providers in the country, but we're greatly indebted. All of us should be, and all of us should continue to be. I became a CNA, when I was in my career, and I wanted to see firsthand what it was. It is a fantastic labor of love, and I'll say it in that way because it is a labor of love, and even the training and the skills, they have competencies and they have really good rigor around making them professionals, and they are professionals. They should be treated like professionals.
Yeah, when I was in high school in my early years of college, I made pocket change, more than pocket change, working as what they called orderlies back then,
Mhm.
and never licensed or certified. But in my life, there were actually two different people who were quadriplegic. One was a guy who had polio. The other was a young guy who dove off a rock, hit a submerged tree, and broke
Mhm.
his neck. And I learned so much. At that time, the money, as a part-time job, was really good money, and those people had a profound influence on my life and who I am today. And I'm not sure we necessarily celebrate how noble that caregiving is. And maybe if we had a better appreciation for it, it would be a lot easier to pull people in and increase the size of that pool.
Well,
So
I give my wife credit because our son is 33 and cerebral palsy, and he walks with a cane, and I've shared with you him, and you all can interact. He's fascinating to learn from, and he's resilient. He has all the elements of wise beyond his years. But I didn't realize before I really got into age tech maybe 15 years ago from ambulatory care and tech, that our house has been age friendly for years. And because
yeah,
it's not just older people, it's the 33-year-old that has CP that walks with a cane. And, what I'm saying, our house has all the elements of that. So I think that goes back to my lifestyle side. He doesn't look at himself as our care project. He looks at himself as a son that has adaptability quotient. And
yeah.
we integrated that into our life. And so Zach has been a great inspiration to me. And daily I get the same thing as you got, somebody that inspires me by seeing and watching and interacting and loving how that person I can be an enabler for.
Yeah, and what was so fascinating to me in both those cases was both of these people, particularly the younger one, lived a very full life and dynamic. They had great life experiences. The younger one, the 2 days after I graduated from high school, we left our little town of Paradise in Northern California, climbed in my brand new car, and did a 2-week road trip up to Canada. And he's completely dependent, paralyzed from the neck down, but he was interested and he had friends, and it was an amazing experience. And so I think that, again, it comes back to so much of that is just telling those stories and talking about how the people we're caring for can be life altering. And I got to get connected with your son, and we can
Love to. He loved that.
swap Chuck Taylor shoe stories. Although he's got a collection that puts mine to shame, I know.
Well,
So
he said, I said, Steve wears them still. I'll be wearing them like Steve. I said, okay, well, I said, I'll tell Steve again today. You said hi, but what defines us is not our disability. What defines us is how we accommodate and integrate what we are given, no matter what it is.
exactly
So
right.
So I think blessings to your work and your audience and all the people that are in our profession and sector. And I'm blessed to have the opportunity to play in these worlds, and even do water aerobics with some very nice ladies that teach me a lot every week. So I have a lot of blessings, and I thank you for having me on.
Well, John, thank you very much. Thank you for what you're doing to make the world a better place. I want to say thanks to Jada Clint for, never really see him on screen, but she is making everything happen. And I just really, really appreciate what you're doing as well. Have a great, great weekend. We are going to say goodbye with this.